Okay, well, welcome. Glad everybody could join us today. What we're going to be doing today is, and this is Jim Morentz of the XchangeCore team, we'll be introducing XchangeCore, which is, as you'll see, the current iteration of a set of web services data orchestration tools for incident management information exchange. And we'll be going into this more deeply now so that we can all see where we're going to be going with the tool set formerly known as UCIDS. What we're going to do today is take some look at some of the fundamental definitions and concepts that have led from UCIDS to XchangeCore and how we got there, and take a look specifically at XchangeCore, take a look at the components of it, which include the open source library, the Geospatial repository, using XchangeCore on the cloud, and the XchangeCore Community, and then we'll have our, as always, open mic session. Now, how about if we get started and take a look at the first of the important concepts. So the first one is information sharing. Now, we've all been familiar with information sharing. We've talked about it for a long time. And there's a real essence to even the definition. This is from Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the definition of sharing. And as you look at all the different programs out there that promise to share, they are truly adhering to this definition, which says that I'm going to take something and give it to others. Or if I got something, I'm going to give pieces of it and give it to others. It's a one-way exchange that takes place. And that's perfectly appropriate for common operating pictures and visualization portals where you want to consume a whole lot of information and be able to have everybody looking at it and displaying it. And sure, yep, they can turn on and off layers and do things like that, but it's fundamentally a consumption of information from a number of different sources. Well, to that, UCIDS has always added the exchange component, the ability to do real-time operations, move information back and forth from one application to another, giving us a definition that's giving and taking, reciprocal giving and receiving, getting something in return for another thing. It's I give you information, you give me information. I give you improved information, you give me more information. And those of you who have been participating in the UCIDS conversations for a long time know how that takes place. You take some information, you put it into UCIDS, other information is associated with it, and both of the applications on two different sides get the same situational awareness. It's truly the only way you can collaborate. If anybody says we're doing collaboration by all looking at the same thing, it's not really collaboration. It's sharing a set of data. The ability to fuse that data, collaborate interactively between two applications, and thus each provide the other with a combined view of situational awareness, allows you to conduct real-time operations. That's the difference between what we describe. If we go on to the next slide with the two arrows, the combination of these is really what's essential and what UCIDS has been developing for all these years. Combining this critical capabilities to do real-time operations, provide situational awareness, collaborate, fuse data, as well as then provide the shared information out to a common operating picture or visualization portal. It's really that combination that has made UCIDS so special and that has given it such exciting capabilities that are used out in the market. But now if we take a look at the next slide, we've got a new element to this. And the new element is based on the problem of how do I organize all that data. If you listen to people, they say, hey, there are 90,000 layers of geospatial data out there. There are dozens of geospatial formats. There are hundreds of non-geospatial formats. Just go into the National Information Exchange model. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of standard sets of how to exchange incident information. And this is all a combination, those of you who have been with us for a while, of geospatial and non-geospatial information, many of which have been purposely built around a set of standards. So we've got lots of standards out there. Well, this exposes us to a real risk because we, as people concerned about incident management, have two major variables that we deal with every day. One is time and one is information. I have limited time in order to make a decision in order to respond to an incident. I have maximum amount of information. But if that information takes me too long or is too complex to gather up within the time period that I have to make my decision, it becomes worthless. Unless I get the right information delivered within the appropriate time period in order to decide, I'm going to be in trouble. So the problem becomes one of organizing all of the data that we have to be able to provide it to all the different applications that are out there as the same set of common data at the same time. There's the essence of the problem that we deal with. And on the next page, we see what it is that this new thing, XchangeCore, combination of Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and private sector efforts over the last several years has brought us to this point of answering that problem with something called orchestration. Orchestration is the process of integrating two or more applications and or services. Think of that as where I get this information. Integrating them together in order to automate, meaning make it automatic. The process, so that all that happens immediately as part of my technology application to the information, or to synchronize data in real time, or both, really. How do I bring all this information together, make it relative, make it certain to be shared with everybody else so that they have it, so they, in fact, can use it and exchange it back through the XchangeCore? That's what orchestration is. And we made early efforts in that. Those of you who are familiar know the tree of knowledge. That's how we associate information. But the things we're going to talk about today and give you the background on where this new XchangeCore is and how it got here, we're going to see many other elements that are now available as part of XchangeCore to be able to provide that information. So if we go take a look at the next slide, let's see a little bit more what this does. What orchestration does is first and foremost translate web service data formats into a common format. Web services, fantastic. It's the wave of the future, how I will move information around. But just because I have a standard protocol for moving that data, which is just what you do when you open a website, doesn't mean that all the data on that website is intelligible to everyone. So think of opening a website that has, you're going to watch the World Cup, so you want to put a .de for Germany. Well, it's going to come up in German. Very simple example, that needs to be translated into something that is common and understandable to you, presumably an English-speaking end user. So web services are a brilliant way to move the information back and forth, but that information still needs to be translated. Second one is, what orchestration means, is transforming non-web service data into that same common data. Because someday the world may be web services, but right now it's not. And there is an abundance of data available in non-web service formats that orchestration means bringing that into a common data format and in effect making it into a web service so that others can effectively share that information. Orchestrate also means taking common operational data, you've heard that phrase before, which has been translated, has been transformed, and turning it into content packages. Those of you who have been with users understand the principle of the tree of knowledge. Well, that's the basis for content packages. Those are the things that I bring together. And when I create that content packages, I've assured that there's the highest relevance of the data that's in that package for those who are looking at that package, for that incident, so that all the information that I've accumulated from all those web services and non-web services, all that information is associated inside of that content package to be able to deliver out to every one of the connected applications this common set of information. Well, if I've got that, that's a huge capability, powerful information. I want to make sure it's going the right places. So the next part of orchestration is securing the agreements among the providers and consumers, those who are giving and those who are taking the data, to make certain that the data only goes where it's authorized. Again, lots of improvements made in that security. The XchangeCore is the result of both secure validation, Department of Homeland Security, its CNA process, as well as Department of Defense and its DIACAP process, plus new ways to make those agreements to become secure and certain that you're providing information and knowing what applications it's going to so that you're confident it's getting put into the right hands. And then the last component of orchestration in XchangeCore is synchronization. One of the problems with web services is that you go out and look for it or you subscribe to it. And yeah, you can poll it periodically to see whether there's an update. But I'm never really sure that everybody's looking at the same thing. What orchestration through XchangeCore assures is that data is synchronized across applications in real time because XchangeCore provides a notification that something has changed. Those applications then are able to assure that their data is current, and you as a community responding to the emergency are able to be certain that the information is consistent across all of the different participants in the emergency response who are sharing information. So those are the components of orchestration. On the next slide, we're going to take a look and see why that's valuable. On the first instance, the ability to translate different data formats, that should be obvious. I don't want to have to read German today. But what that enables, most importantly, and the value comes from the two-way exchange. By allowing a translation, I'm creating that common format, I'm able to move that data into not just a single viewing application, but many processing applications that can do more with that common operational data, process it and reshare it back to XchangeCore, thus allowing it to exchange that information with all of the other connected and approved applications. So that translation process is more than just being able to switch from English to German and back and forth, which is what the two-way exchange does. It allows somebody to add something, add a plume model in that German website, using that as an illustration, and have it show up in the English language website without somebody having to sit down and say, I wonder whether there are any plumes there, and I wonder whether any of those plumes are in a language I can understand. Orchestration through XchangeCore delivers that capability. Second component, transforming non-web service data, really valuable. You've got, I'm going to bet 30%, 50%, maybe even 80% of the data you're using in any of your emergency operations centers today is from a non-web service application. And that non-web service translation is one that really extends to non-web service and non-geospatial data, which is the predominance of non-web service. Geospatial, they pretty much have the web service act down. But for anything that doesn't start out on a map, you're probably not looking at an existing web service. Needing to get all the information into common operational data, that is web service, that's not web service, geospatial, non-geospatial, the value comes in being able to take that non-web service information, turn it into a web service, and provide a geospatial association for it. Which all takes us down to what is really the central one of these, the ability to orchestrate relevant data. How do we compose those content packages out of that common operational data in order to provide those relevant results without people having to additionally discover it? That's absolutely critical, and that's the central piece, and my value then comes from grabbing data here, grabbing data there, moving data back and forth, and always composing it into this orchestrated content package so that I can go one place and be able to know what's happening. Not always having all the same data. A lot of it, particularly in the geospatial, and we call geospatial bookmarks, I'm going to point you to where to go get that data out of a web service, because if it is a web service, you ought to be looking at that. I'm not going to copy their data because then I don't know whether it's current. So the data orchestration is sometimes going to have current data. Other times it's going to be pointing you to current data. But in each case, you've got the path, which our next value is assurance that I have secure agreements for this exchange to take place. That's going to provide a assured receipt and delivery of information, bring it in, take it out, bring it in, take it out, for those content packages, so that they're going to or coming back from only those authorized applications. Value there is confidence in knowing what applications your data is going to. And last piece, synchronizing data. Where's my value in that? Hey, if you don't have real-time notification and data updates, you're going to be out of sync. You're not going to be absolutely certain that the fire department and the police department are looking at the same information, and that somebody couldn't be saying, I'm moving down this street, at the same time somebody is saying, I'm putting a roadblock up on this street. And if you're waiting on the cycling through web services or the discovery of changes, you have the potential for being out of sync. So synchronizing data, pushing it to the authorized applications makes certain that you have that currency and the consistency of view across there. So XchangeCore is, through its orchestration, providing some significant value. Let's take a look at this graphically over on the next slide. And it just highlights some of the problems that we have, that there's data in many different formats. That we've got web services, I've got non-web services, I got geospatial, non-geospatial, got API-based operational data, and I even could have had one on here. Sometimes you have to just look right at the database, which gets really ugly. And all of that is going out directly to top viewers or other applications over on the right-hand side. And if you note, every one of those has a separate connection to every other application that's there, which points out some of the difficulty. It's not an enormous task, but you can get out of not have all of the connections at all the time that you want. The ability to get out of sync, you just see that's a little more confusing than you might want to have. If we look at the next slide, it becomes even a little more problematic, because those big dash lines mean, you know what? I'm not really built for looking at non-geospatial web service data, or I'm not really built for looking at an API. I don't have that connection. And the little tiny dots means I'm not even thinking about it. There's just no way I'm going to be able to go out and touch that kind of data from the particular kind of viewer or application I have on the right-hand side. It just isn't going to work without somebody sitting down and writing some specialized program to fill in the dots that are there, to make that a solid line. So the concept that everyone is evolving to needs some help. The next slide, we take a look at how we get to that help. The next slide moves information into the XchangeCore. And it does that through, on the left-hand side, translating web services, transforming non-web services into that common view of data inside of XchangeCore, where orchestration, synchronization, and secure agreements take place. That combination is what makes for all the value that we just talked about. And what it delivers on the next slide, the benefits. Related, orchestrated incident content. I know where I can go grab that. I've got current data. It's simultaneously. It's continuously accessible to me on demand. I can go out there and hit that anytime I want to. And I'm able to move that information both into other applications, into a COP, and provide that through the secure agreements that we've talked about. That exchange is absolutely critical to, let's say, avoid the problems that everybody sees in a real emergency of just the enormous amount of data, people going every which way, and a need to have everybody coordinated and informed. Taking a look at the next page, let's start to take a look at some of the heritage here, how XchangeCore got here. Those of you who have been tuning into the usage call for years know that architecture was done quite a while ago. And we had a gap in that 2006 to 2014. There's about 2.5 years of funding gaps there as Department of Homeland Security continually evaluated the proceeding through the continued development of usage. So 2006, some architectural design. There's a significant period of time for a 2-year development project where we built a reference implementation and a couple of years of pilot implementations. Graduation last year from DHS Science and Technology, and then throughout this year, been operating as part of this open source community driven by the private sector. At the same time, Department of Defense, Northern Command in particular, has been looking at how to solve the problem that we've just talked about for the military, with a particular element of Northern Command is the United States, basically, and how to solve the problem of that information exchange inside the fence and outside the fence, across the military-civilian divide. In 2012, Northcom adopted usage, saying this is how we are going to go forward with our information exchange and, in particular, our movement of information between military and civilian installations. For the next almost 2 years, there's been something called MATADRR, the Mission Assurance Threat Assessment Disaster Response and Recovery Program, that has been driving, using usage, driving new capabilities into usage, creating something that inside the .mil world is going to be called Keystone, or is called Keystone. And this year marked the release of some of the first portions of Keystone. Has been through the DIACAP process, and later on this year, we end up with what on the next slide shows XchangeCore, which is the continuing combination of the usage heritage, the XchangeCore additions, plus the usage community. I really should have put that on here. The usage community, because some of the things we're going to be talking about have been developed exclusively by the private sector partners inside of the usage community. So that's where the heritage has come from. And on the next slide, take a look at some of the objectives of that Keystone program. Exactly the same kind of things that you've seen in usage. Bottom right-hand corner, it's standards-based. What we want to be able to do is provide the ability to always maintain and use at maximum other people's standards. Don't want to expend the effort that others are already doing. Second component on the upper right-hand side, it is interagency, not just police, fire, emergency management, but across the military, the chemical biological commands, northern commands, other commands, and that link out to the ability to provide information to the civilian sector. Bottom left-hand side, something that usage has always promoted, critical edge users. That really says, I want to put it into the hands of the people who matter. There's people who are out on the street. And you saw, 3 years ago when usage released its first mobile app capabilities and how that has been taken by other members of the usage community and the private sector, expanded significantly, and there are commercial mobile app products out there pushing information out to mobile data terminals in police cars. So that pushing out to the edge you've seen in many, many instances, all of which is designed to provide enhanced decision support. And if we look at decision support, we look at the two critical variables I mentioned, information and time. The whole effort of Keystone is to enable that timely information that's integrated across military, civilian, up and down the military hierarchy, and bringing all those people together. So that Keystone mission, you can see where it fit with usage, and you can see where it's going to be able to improve usage. On the next slide, we see some of the real key focus points. We'll talk about this in much more detail when we look at XchangeCore as a technical discussion. But effectively, the military approach said we needed some better ways to assure that we know who we're sharing to. So, won't bother reading this slide, but effectively we have built much better exchanges through secure agreements as part of the Keystone and MATADRR program. A couple of the key elements just to highlight for you. Now, there's some proximity sharing that says, gee, I only want to share this information to another XchangeCore if this information is within X number of miles of where that XchangeCore is located. So think breaking into regional operations. Hey, I don't need Florida to know what Georgia is doing if it's more than 50 miles outside the Florida border. Ability to set up that kind of information is one of the key benefits that comes out. Secondly, the set of extended metadata that allow me to develop much more complex interpretation of the data to be able to know where I are able to provide the information so that people can select better the sharing that they're going to take place. we'll take a look at a couple more things that MATADRR has added to the XchangeCore implementation in a minute. So if we go on to the next slide, just want to get you to the results of what XchangeCore does. First of all, it performs that information exchange and sharing, just like we've always talked about, among authorized applications through those rule-based agreements. You've just seen how the rules have gotten more sophisticated. Next slide, we've got the orchestration that takes place, non-geospatial and geospatial data that fuses that into content packages out of that relevant common operating data that everybody can then read. Next, we securely and simultaneously make that data available for applications that don't just look at it, but they process it. And then simultaneously, that's all available for geospatial visualization, so that I'm able to pull that information out and have it synchronized and simultaneously available on my top as I do in every other application. And then finally, for the emergency management and public safety disciplines in government, military, and the private sector, that's where XchangeCore focuses. It will bring all that information into this sort of the central marketplace at this point of organizations that will benefit from XchangeCore and the information that it provides. That's the result of getting to XchangeCore. On the next slide, the depiction of it. And you're going to see this many times in the future. XchangeCore centrally focusing on operational collaboration and geospatial visualization. That's the key elements of what happens when I orchestrate data through XchangeCore. And its provision out to now interacting units in Department of Defense, Emergency Management, Public Safety Community, and the private sector. Groups that, for those of you who've tuned into any of the SABRE exercises or SABRE presentations, private sector now becoming a very good provider of information to the XchangeCore orchestrator that then allows it to be shared out to the appropriate government agencies. All that's being built out of DoD and the MATADRR program coming out of Department of Defense and its keystone. Next slide is going to show you that there's a whole environment that we're now have created to bring together for XchangeCore. First piece of it, of course, is the XchangeCore Web Services data orchestration. But we add to that connectors from applications to XchangeCore. So those XchangeCore connectors are an important component of the environment. Geospatial repository, we're going to be talking about. The ability to do cloud hosting of this XchangeCore solution and all the associated components. And then finally, the community. Building the community of the technology providers and end users, absolutely critical part of this environment. I just want to touch on each one of these briefly, because what they do really is form the next 5 of these tutorials that we're going to do. We're going to go through each one of these sessions and introduce you to the new components related to XchangeCore Environment, which is shown again depicted out on the next screen as being able to bring together all the different pieces that are part of the XchangeCore environment. Take a look at the next slide. The XchangeCore Geospatial Repository. We're going to have being, in a sense, freed from some of the contract requirements that we had in the past. We now can create better associations with some private sector.
It's very much like all the conventional open source licenses, and the open source information is available to anyone. The executable license will be available, as it has been up to this point, and always will be, at no cost, available to federal and responder agencies for them to be able to use this tool. So if you're part of the response community, you continue to be able to get any of the information, whether it's the XchangeCore itself or any XchangeCore connectors, with no problem, no cost. Taking a look at the next slide, one of the other major components of XchangeCore now is the XchangeCore Cloud. XchangeCore Cloud is made possible by two different contributions. One from the Keystone military program, the other from the private sector. The Keystone military program has led us to create what you're seeing depicted there graphically as virtual core. A single physical core now has just a sharing agreement that allow you to partition that core into individual components, thus maintaining only a single physical environment, but having the ability to have multiple virtual cores, as it were, inside through the sophisticated sharing agreements that exist. Huge, huge capability to help move that whole environment up to a cloud-hosted environment. One of the other components that came out of both the latter part of the DHS that fully implemented inside of the Keystone tool is now the use of Microsoft SQL Server in the Windows environment. You can still get the open source code for the database. If you want to use the open source database. Works with both Microsoft SQL Server Express, which is the free version of it, as well as if in your implementation you have a server enterprise, you can install that as well. Third major component is the Linux operating system. This has entirely been done by the private sector. Several of the people I heard are on the call today who've been involved in putting the Linux versions together. And apologize for that background noise. I'm in a enormous thunderstorm right now. So, Linux operating system, another key element because that's the major cloud environment. So, SQL Server, Linux operating system, virtual cores, all the major components to allow us to provide the cloud-hosted solution. Cloud hosting itself will be done by private sector organizations that will be working with the XchangeCore community to set up the hosting environment. If we take a look at the next page, we're going to see the XchangeCore Community. And this will be the last of these 5 introductory sessions that we're going to have. Thursday tutorials, just to give you some highlights. Thursday tutorials, bi-weekly tutorials will continue. The implementation guidance calls that I do with, at any given time, 12 to 15 of the core implementations as they're working through their stages of growth. Those remain available. In addition, now we have formally proposed installation technical support line that during that period immediately after the time you're developing or doing a XchangeCore implementation with formal support that you're going to be able to get. XchangeCore website. You can find that today. That gives you a little bit of the highlight information. But as each one of these sessions unfolds, we'll be expanding that. The XchangeCore website for the community side is going to have blog and commentary on it. The document library, you can become familiar with it in use form, the updated documents supporting XchangeCore. And then, as we've done in the past, best practices, but a more formal way for people to be able to enter their best practices. XchangeCore Community, just to make sure everyone is clear, is open to everybody.
private sector organizations, public sector, volunteer, non-governmental, non-profit, educational, particularly our technology provider community, and domestic and international. We've got quite a few international people following XchangeCore and a couple of international implementations going on now. So that XchangeCore community becomes one of the driving force. It's what has helped to crystallize the XchangeCore over the last few months and allows us to be able to provide the capabilities of XchangeCore out to all of the members of this community. We take a look at the next page, lay out for you the schedule for taking a look at the different components of the XchangeCore environment. I'm going to take an in-depth look at XchangeCore and the new things in it on July 24th, 7th of August. We're going to take a look at the value proposition for GIS. Why does ArcGIS Online become the XchangeCore Geospatial repository? And what's the value that XchangeCore offers to GIS analysts and users? Real key focus, because there's no way you're going to run an emergency without geospatial information, and all information is not geospatial. It's as simple as that. August 21st, XchangeCore connectors. Here we're going to be introducing the open source availability of all the XchangeCore connectors and leading you through GitHub and your ability to gather up all that information. September 11th, XchangeCore Cloud. You'll be introduced to those companies that want to offer out a commercial implementation of the cloud, as well as all the information about how to create your own internal cloud. The number of organizations support their own cloud-like capabilities or cloud capabilities with their own data centers. We'll provide you the information on how you can take the XchangeCore capabilities and bring them internal in a cloud-hosted environment. And September 25th, we'll formally launch the XchangeCore Community that has existed now in robust form, but we'll be able to have all the different components and introduce you to some of the key players so far who will be sharing some of their early best practices. So that is a summary of where the future lies. XchangeCore, all the different components to it, and our ability to provide those services out to all of you in a new and robust fashion. So on the next slide, as always, the microphone is open. Your questions, comments, thoughts are appreciated. The microphone is open. Anybody questions, comments? All right.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. Zulma from Claro, Puerto Rico. Do you have any, will it be any cost for the implementation in the private sector?
Actually, could I ask you to do that question again?
Is there any cost involved for private sector to use it?
Right. On the private sector side, not for the open source variety. There will be a cost established if you want to have support associated with it and the actual executable code distribution version. That hasn't been established yet, but for everything that's available on GitHub, all the connectors, all the other things, you can get them at no cost.
Well, the cost is based on the service, not in the use of the program. The cost involved for support.
Right.
Implementation.
Right. After for a specific, obviously, if you're looking for somebody to do the implementation for you, you're going to be turning
to the organization to do that, and that will cost. For the XchangeCore team, there's a limited number of hours that are provided to help do initial implementation for each site, and then there are additional long-term support contracts, just like anybody else. So to get the code, there's no cost for private sector. If you want to have continuing support after a limited number of hours at the beginning, you will be able to subscribe to a maintenance contract for that. But we expect that the vast majority of people will not be incurring any costs for what they're going to be doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Oh, this is a lot to throw at you, I know, and that's why we're going to take each one of these separately, individually, as we move through the process over the next few weeks. And at that time, we'll be able to share more information about each one of the components that we've developed, and you'll be able to ask more questions. Unless I hear any final comments from anybody? No? Thanks very much. Glad you could tune in, and we'll talk to you 2 weeks from now. Bye, everybody.